We are live.
Hello and greetings. Welcome to another Educator Innovator Hangout on Air. Today is October 28th somehow, and today we have, 2015, and today we have the opportunity to welcome educators who are LRNG Innovator Challenge grant recipients. These educators have been working over this past year to expand time and space for youth interests and production-centered work in schools, and we're really thrilled that you can all join us today, so thank you for being here. I'm your host. I'm Christina Cantrell from the National Writing Project. I've been excited to follow the work of these educators through various blog posts and community calls and conversations that we've had over this past year. And so really thrilled that we could come together and share some of the work that we've been doing with each other, because we actually haven't had too much time to talk with each other since the projects have started to wrap up and we are taking our learning into our next stage. Also to share with our partners here at Ed Innovator. The webinar today, actually, this is the third in a three-part series that we've just done, featuring the LRNG Innovation Challenge recipients. This special series is being aired also as part of Connected Educator Month, so happy Connected Educator Month, everybody. And we encourage you to go back and watch the previous webinars as there's various work happening around the country related to this idea of time and space for connected learning. So before I ask our guests to introduce themselves, I want to give a little background on the LRNG Innovator Challenge, and I will use a little slideshow to do that. So hold 1 second. Okay, great. So the Ed Innovators program of innovation challenges supports great educators who are working to create and spread creative and connected learning opportunities for young people. Our current challenge is part of LRNG Innovators, an effort that was originally launched through a partnership between John Legend's Show Me campaign and the National Writing Project. LRNG Innovators is now part of LRNG.org and also found at the hashtag #WeAreLRNG. In 2014, the LRNG Innovator Challenge posed the question, what if learning had no bells and no walls? In response to that question, 14 grants were awarded to teams of educators who have been hard at work developing inspiring projects and programs to expand the time and space that young people have for interest-driven learning in schools. You can look across this set of work at educatorinnovator.org/LRNG 2014. And today we're thrilled to have representatives from 3 of these teams with us to share their work. Today we're going to hear from a group in Charlotte, North Carolina about a project called Making Our Worlds. Then we will hear about a program called Creating After School and Summer STEM Labs in Silver City, New Mexico. And then we'll go to Chicago and hear a project called Tilden Talks at Tilden High School. So let me exit out of this and come back to the webinar. And I wanted to give a chance just for everybody to introduce themselves, and we'll go, I'll call your names because we're not all in the same order. And then after we introduce ourselves, then we'll start to hear from each of the projects one at a time. And each project will have about 10 minutes to share about the work that's been happening and what you've learned from the work. And we invite our listeners who might be listening at the chat or to join us via the chat if you're listening live, and also on Twitter. And we invite you to really think about this challenge with us, how to create time and space for interest-driven and production-centered learning for youth inside of schools. And so if you can think about this in your own context, and then think about some of the connections that are made as these educators describe the work happening in their own context. So great, why don't we, after we do the presentations, let me just say that we'll open it up for discussion. So if you have any comments or things that you'd like to share, please share them in the chat or via Twitter. We'll be monitoring those, and then we can bring them here into our discussion. Okay, I think it's all my preliminary stuff. Dave, why don't you start by introducing yourself, just where are you, where are you based, your role, etc.
Okay, great. My name is Dave Chandler. I'm the Director of Community Outreach and Development for Aldo Leopold Charter School. And we're in Silver City, New Mexico. It's a small community of about 10,000, very rural, a huge county with about 30,000 folks in it. And we've worked with 7 or 8 community partners to do our project this year.
Great. Thanks, Dave. Sharon, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I am Sharon Holmes. I am from Chicago, Illinois, and my project is Tilden Talks. We started about 2 years ago. I'm not quite sure else. You can check us out at tildentalks.org. We mainly are about pursuing, helping our students pursue their voice and learning to use their voice to affect change in their neighborhoods.
Great. We'll come back and hear more about that project. Thank you, Sharon. And Steve, why don't you go ahead?
I'm Steve Fulton. I teach 8th grade language arts at Kannapolis Middle School, and I'm a teacher consultant for the UNC Charlotte Writing Project. Our project is called Making Our Worlds, and in it we've brought together 4 teachers and students from 4 different schools around the Charlotte area. All the schools are urban and Title I.
Great. Thanks so much. So again, if you're listening to us live, feel free to jump into the chat, tweet things out, think with us about some of these questions that we're bringing up, and ask questions about what's described. And then we'll open up a discussion after we've heard from all 3 of the projects. So Steve, I was going to start with you. So you're right here. So why don't we start with the project that you all have been working on down there in Charlotte?
Okay. So as I just mentioned, our project brings together 4 different urban middle schools, their teachers and their students working together as makers of the language arts. And the idea of make and the maker movement is something that has been popping up a lot in schools, but typically under the umbrella of STEM, where you have students using computers and robotics to build and create things. But the underlying idea of make that was so appealing to us is that they're open-ended experience where students are creating with their hands and with their words, where they are the ones who are in charge and who are driving the composition. And as a writing project site, we're really interested in how writing is making, and how if we make space within our schools and in our classrooms for make to happen, interesting things can also happen with thinking and learning and writing. It's a much more empowering approach to learning than, say, the typical teacher directing instruction. And typically, where things are often scripted in public schools, it offers a very different approach to education. So we wanted to think about how we could make this work in the context of the language arts classroom. How make can be a way for students to use the language to solve issues of importance to them and their communities. We're all middle school teachers, and in middle school there's plenty of energy and imagination possessed by the students, and we felt like make provided a great way into harnessing this energy and imagination, connecting it to the real concerns that students are bringing with them from the community, and making space to bring us into the classroom and do something that was real and mattered to the students. So a little bit about how we made this work. I'm going to share a bit about what the different sites have done for this project, though I can probably speak most to what I'm doing. I've been connected with the 3 other schools throughout, but I can tell you most about what my students do. So I have a few slides that I just wanted to use to talk through some of the sorts of work that has happened this past year through this project, and then I'm just going to talk a bit about what we're doing to make it sustainable this year.
Great.
So I'm going to screen share first. So screen share, turn on display. Whoa, I just saw a million of them. Can you guys see that?
Yeah, that looks great.
The Prezi?
Yep.
Okay. And so the first few slides are just going to talk about what a couple other teachers have done. And the way that, before I say any of that, the way I should say it, we've connected all of our classrooms is through a Google Plus community that I'm pulling up here, where you can see that students are posting their work and responding to others. And so there's currently 400 members in it from all the different schools. And this was just a way for students to stay connected, to see what other students were doing, and also to engage in some dialogue both within and across the sites. So going back to these slides, this one here. All right, so one of our schools, Randy's school, he had a little bit less freedom to work with than some of the other schools. Like, he was mandated that he teach Huck Finn during a certain amount of time, and that amount of time felt when we were all working together. And so while one of the things that he did that was really interesting was he found those mechanisms that included those in greeting cards, where you open the greeting card and it speaks back to you, and he thought, like, what if we did this with text? So what if we integrated technology directly into text to give students a voice to speak back to the sorts of things that were happening in the text that they were reading? And so with this idea, they hacked Huck Finn, right? So they found different parts of Huck Finn that they thought were particularly important to them, or they wanted to respond to, and so now they recorded their voice within the pages of the book. So when you flip through the pages of the book, you could hear the students' voices speaking back about how this piece of the text was relevant and what they had to say about it. And these are just a few of Randy's slides of his students working on the project. And they wrote a bit about it too on their blogs afterwards. That was something that all of our sites had in common, was we wrote in addition to just making stuff. Writing was interwoven throughout the process, before, during, and after. So the community projects, this happened in Mary's school. So Mary is she's in charge of the curriculum there, and so she's overseeing many teachers who are interested in connecting their students with community. And so for Mary, what she did was she got some students, she thought with this group of teachers who were interested in involving their students. They had their students identify important issues within their community, and they worked on speaking back to these issues through making a whole different variety of projects that were completely thought of by the students, and were also put on display for the students. I think they had a community event. So here's some of the different badges they made in response to, it looks like, drug abuse. It's written in Spanish. Mary was going to be here, but she wasn't able to make it, so I'm not exactly sure what she was going to say through each of these. So I'm just going to flip through them. And I believe with her, it was her students who organized the community event. Okay, so now back to my classroom, and I can probably talk the most about this one. So we were in the middle of like literature circle, book club reading. Students are reading different novels in my class that broadly fit under the thematic unit subject of injustice. And so from these books, students pulled out some issues that they thought were important to their communities, where they could take some action and respond, and wanted to put their voices out in the communities about these issues. So they pull these issues out, spend a little bit of time researching them and doing some creative writing around them, and then working in collaboration with a local science center, Discovery Place, we created pop-up books. And you may have heard of pop-up, you may have seen pop-up books, especially if you have small children at home and they take these books and then they quickly tear them apart, and you think, wow, that was a huge waste of $5, but maybe you also had the chance to look inside the books and see the complex engineering that's happening. And so working with Discovery Place, we thought, well, what if students use pop-up books as a medium to convey their stories? Because yes, even though they break fast, they're a compelling medium for storytelling, because they're very interactive, right? You don't just read the words or see the images, but you actually, with your hands, get to interact with the story. And when you have a story that you want people not just to hear or see, but experience, pop-up books seemed like a really interesting way to do that. And so Robbie spent a few days, Robbie was the educator from Discovery Place, teaching students about paper engineering, which I didn't even know was a thing until we started to think about how we could make this project work. And while he was doing that, and we did this in collaboration with the science teacher on my team, So while he was doing that in the science classroom, I was spending some time in my classroom with students developing these creative writing pieces and also doing some storyboarding for what their books might work with. And here's just a picture of one of my students working on that. And I like this picture because it shows how rich of a literacy-related experience it is. Students just aren't creating things and making, but they're also like composing across various mediums. And then here's another group of guys that on the surface looked like they were arguing the whole time, couldn't figure out anything, but they actually did some really, managed to do some really cool work and learned quite a bit about just working with each other. They ended up making this book. This is from one of the pages in their book. It was they read a book called The Berlin Boxing Club, and they really wanted to know more about like the Holocaust and why it happened. And so, since they were really interested in comic books, they decided they were going to use their knowledge as like of the Holocaust as like a backdrop for a superhero origin story, which was incredibly original. I've never heard that being done before. This group who created this book, as you can see, there's like a pull tab. They made their pop-up book more like a textbook, or like more like a report on the subject of prescription drug abuse that they had researched, and you can pull the tab down and it will show different drugs that they were commonly abused, and even interesting, more interesting about that, abused commonly within the community. So they had some of the research took place by being in contact with a local hospital to find out which drugs were most commonly abused. These two girls had a history of being bullied, and so this is like the blurb on the back of their book, where they talked about their own personal experiences with being bullied and how it affected how they viewed themselves. And then this is one of the pages from their book where you open up the page and out pops a girl looking at her reflection in the mirror. And so while the story they crafted was physical, they based it on their own, fictional, they based it on their own experiences and made that clear, that blurb on the back. The work that they did wasn't just happening in the classroom, and the connections with the community weren't just the connections that they made with the people from Discovery Place that came in and worked with us. They also got their message out there by sharing their work on social media. They posted videos and wrote a bit about it and shared it on Google+. They also got in contact with the local library and asked them to put their books on display. And so there's a Facebook post that the local library put out. So they put all the students' books in the local teen sections for people to come in and experience them. And students also took their skills that they learned about how to create, how to paper engineer, to the Discovery Place Science Center to host a maker fair at the Discovery Place, where they both showed patrons their books that they've created and let them experience those books, and also taught patrons how to paper engineer themselves.
Steve?
That's about it. Yep.
Oh, great. Okay. Some of the last few slides didn't advance. I'm still looking at the pharmacy work, so I just wanted to tell you that before.
That's weird.
Okay.
Well, I guess you probably got from my descriptions of what they were. There are a couple of Facebook posts from community organizations that showed the work that the students were doing.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I'm going to try to stop my screen sharing if I can do that. That's stop. I'll click that. Okay, is that better? Or is it still frozen?
It still seems like it's frozen.
Alright, so
Let's see. We haven't run into this one yet, so.
No. Alright. I'm going to try reloading the page. You might lose me for a little bit.
Yeah, so we might lose you. Let me just say that I know you work with the UNC Charlotte Writing Project, and that all the teachers are connected with that project. So it'd be great to hear some of what you've been thinking about as colleagues across this project. But why don't you troubleshoot what's going on? We can move to Dave, and then we can come back to that. Does that make sense? Yep. Okay, that makes sense because he just dropped. Okay. Dave, you're up. Why don't we move to Silver City, New Mexico, and hear how you all have been creating time and space for this work.
Okay, great. Thank you. I'm glad to be here today and talk about the work we've been doing. We had an opportunity to work with students both during the spring semester, but mostly over the summer. We had created some after-school STEM labs during the school year that were, typical kind of like robotics clubs, things like that. But it was the summertime that we really got cooking with our community partners. And most of the work that we did was not school-based. It was our community partners working with a diverse groups of students who certainly are attending school, but many of them, in the summertime, they're not attending school during the summer. And they're participating in these projects, and they're coming from many different schools across the county. We worked with 225 students in grades K through 12 over the summer. With our 8 project partners, they conducted about 31 different projects. Really exciting work. The idea was to work with community partners who already had existing programming in place. So they, for instance, the public library, they would do a Friday reading is fun challenge and encourage students to come into their maker space on Fridays. And they needed some additional support to make that those projects, have materials that would be exciting, to have the expertise of our teachers to look at their program and see if there's any ways that the program could be enhanced, and really emphasize math and science. But they did all the work. Their staff worked with the students. They recruited their own students. They had their own place. They had, for the most part, they had a little bit of budget for materials and supplies. But they became a project partner, like our 8 different partners, part of the summer network, Summer of Science. And the students who participated not only experienced the ongoing project that was presented by the library, but we really wanted to make sure that in all of our projects that the adult leaders or teachers or project managers really found opportunities to point out when math and science learning was happening, and that the students were really good at it. And for many of our students in New Mexico who are not known for their great math and science skills, as the national standards tell us, this was the first time that many of them felt successful doing math or science, these projects. And they're great hands-on projects. They're fun to do. A lot of times the students didn't even realize they were doing math, but when it was pointed out to them by our leaders, they're like, wow, I'm working on this bicycle chain and I'm learning about ratios, and I am pretty good at this. And so our idea was to try to find a way to get students excited about math and science in these high-interest community settings that would then be a way for them to feel better about the work that they're doing back in the classroom when school would start in the fall. So we're trying to not only enhance their skills, but really change some of their attitudes about math and science. It's a huge issue for kids who kind of get into this rut thinking, like, I'm no good at math. I just can't do math. And they kind of give up. They don't try. And they get into this kind of cycle of self-defeatism that, then impacts their learning for the rest of their school career. But during these high-interest projects over the summer, we're hoping to kind of change their attitude a little bit, and then they come back to school and go, you know what? There are parts of math I am really good at, and I found that out this summer in these projects. I have a few slides I'd like to go through, and it would probably help prompt me to talk about the different projects that were going on. Let me see if I can find them here.
Yeah, it's great. I'd love to see the work.
Did it come up?
Not yet. There we go.
Okay. And do you see a slide of some students with goggles on right now?
Yes, adorable.
So these are students at the Montessori school. They had a summer program. Again, an existing program that they did all the recruitment. They enrolled all the students. I worked with their staff member who's a aspiring teacher. She's going to do her student teaching this semester and then work in a classroom in a public school next fall. But she had this idea about working with the students on getting different items from their garden and making these concoctions. And so they were some herbal remedies. And so the students would study the different attributes of each of the plants they were working with. Most of the time they would come up, it was these groups of plants that they would make teas and herbal remedies with. And so they did all the research. They found out the attributes of the plants. They went and harvested and dried the plants, and then they made their either bottles or baggies full of tea, and then were able to list out the kinds of uses that you would use them for. So it was a pretty neat way to do some science, do some research, understand the chemical compounds of the different plants they were working with. And here they are in the kitchen, probably doing something. They're brewing some of their concoctions to then do some testing on them. We also did a lot of work with the impact of heat and cold on the different chemical compounds. Here they are in the kitchen again. Out in the garden, working with some of the chickens. You can see it's just, most of the projects are just great fun. And one of the highlights of our project was that we had students typically of different ages participating. So there were huge opportunities for peer education. Many times the older students had been through the project or had participated, and then they became a helper or a leader or somebody who could work with younger students to really make sure that their experience was enhanced. And as you know, the younger students just love having the older students around. It's really great when a 9th or 10th grader can work with a 5th grader. They just are so excited about having that peer education component or peer helper. Let's see if I can get some of the other ones here. This is some of the promotion we did with our 8 different partners. We wanted to make sure that the students, recognized that they were in a project, that they were in the Summer of Science program. So whether they attended at the public library or the volunteer center or at Binary Circuits or wherever, they recognized and felt like they were part of the Summer of Science. Here's a project at the library. Again, high interest, students making stick bombs. And so they fashion the sticks together, and there's enough energy in the bending of the sticks that they can let them go, and they kind of explode all over. This was more of one of our few classroom-based projects over the summer, and it was held at our high school, Aldo Leopold Charter School. It was a digital media class that one of our teachers did, and had about 14 students participating from 5 different schools. It was kind of awesome to have, kids kind of hanging out together from different schools that don't typically get a chance to work together and get to know each other. There's more digital lab opportunities. She utilized 2 helpers in her class. We actually paid them a stipend, the student helpers. They were pretty excited about that. I think they each made $50 for the week that they worked, and they were like, yay! More digital media. This is a project at the public library. They're taking diodes and electronics and different batteries and things and making a project. I think this might be either the little lie detector they made or the motion censored light project that they worked on. But much of the maker space work at the Silver City Public Library is very electronics based. More work at the library. Here's just some of our promotional stuff that we did. Again, we really wanted to make the students feel like they're not just attending something at the library or the school, but they are part of this summer initiative. These are library projects. I'm not sure what those are. We also participated in our 4th of July parade. As you can imagine, in a small community, the 4th of July is a big deal, and the parade's a big deal. The whole town comes out for that. We thought it wouldn't it be great to have a float that the students designed that talked about science being fun and promoted the Summer of Science. And part of our one of our goals for our project was to try to move some of the community norms around science and math. That as a community, we value academic achievement, and that's something a little bit different for our community. It's, our float was interesting, and we had a student on a unicycle riding, and it was, we had some American flags and a big DNA molecule and some other things, but it was a nice way to engage the community in some thought about, well, who are we as a community, and is math and science important to us as business leaders, as community members? So we tried to move the needle on that a little bit through the project, and thought that the 4th of July parade would be a great place to do that. We had an interesting group that actually built the float. We had about 6 kids work on it, and the youngest was a kindergartner, and the oldest was an 11th grader, and they were the design committee for the float, and we just had a blast putting it together, deciding what should be on it, and how do you show that science is fun, and it was a great time. We had a lot of comments about our float. Here's more work at the library. It's like some research work they're doing and presentations. We're, again, really hoping that a lot of the work that we did at our 31 different projects with our 225 students is a positive experience that they can take back in the classroom with them this fall. We had students, again, grades K through 12, participating from 13 different schools. So it wasn't realistic for us to be able to, kind of follow them and, see if they're doing better. We just didn't have the resources, or it wasn't really part of what we wanted to track. It was just our assumption that having fun with math and science over the summer was going to give them some increased confidence about doing math and science during the school year. We did have an end of summer celebration. Wanted to bring all of our partners together and have our students do some presentations and hear about what we worked on. That was kind of our end event. It was a lot of fun. We took a little bit of the money from the grant and bought a bunch of back-to-school supplies and passed those out to many of our low-income families that simply can't afford, if they've got multiple kids in their family or caring for multiple kids. It's really hard for them to afford some of the supplies to get back to school, and so it was kind of a nice way for students to feel ready and on an equal footing with some of their peers. Here's a garden project. Students did irrigation, doing soil testing and the effects of different, hydration rates on different plants. I'm always shocked about how young some of these students look, but here's a young student, probably a 3rd or 4th grader, putting together an irrigation system for the garden, learning how to use the tools. And
thank you so much. Those pictures are great, Dave. Yeah.
Probably it for the
great, thank you.
slides.
And it's interesting to think about the role that the summer plays in schools too, and supporting connected learning, and in those spaces, and between those spaces. So thank you very much.
I'm going to try to get out of our screen share here.
Okay, great.
There we go.
Great, thank you, Dave. And so
Yeah,
why
so
don't we, go ahead.
We just had a great summer, really excited about the work we were doing, and huge opportunities to continue, particularly next summer. All the partners want to reconvene and find ways to work together. It was a great way to leverage very few resources and have an impact. We're a resource poor community, but like I said, most of our partners already had their existing programming in place with whatever funding source they had. So this was an extra nice layer of icing on the cake, so to speak, to connect all those projects and enhance some of the work that they're doing.
Great, thank you. And Sharon, why don't we hear from you? And I know you sort of have been doing this work pretty intensely within one school in Chicago, but you're also connected to a larger community of schools. So it'd be great to hear about those and those connections you guys have been making. You're on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So Tilden Talks is it started because one of our students was killed, and the kids were really upset about how her death was portrayed in the media. And the media got a lot of stuff wrong, and they had a lot to say about it. And so we started this website so they could speak their truth as they knew it. And it also gave them opportunity to speak truth to power. And as they found out, people were actually responding to them, and so they decided, oh, we want to keep this going. So the first summer, it was actually before we got the grant, we had 4 students, and we gave them iPods, and we had them record their lives and basically talk about what they were going through, what was happening with them. And when they came back to school the following, after that summer, they were like, we want to keep doing this. We need to keep doing this. And so we decided to make a club in school so that they could continue to work on their writing skills, their journalism skills, and try to support them with that. And so we had a club, and we invited the students to come into that space and do their writing and learn video production skills, which they did, to learn radio and music production skills, which they did. And a lot of that was driven by their own interest in what they wanted to do, their choice of expression. So a lot of them spent time after school in that space. Part of it was the fact that it was a safe space, that the Digital Atelier is a safe space for our students. And we don't have this, we're in the middle of the inner city on the south side, and so there's a lot of gang violence, a lot of drugs, a lot of gangs, and so the kids just needed a safe space to be in, so they took advantage of that. And so this last summer, we earned the grant, and so the following summer, we had 4 kids the first summer. So the second summer, which was 2015, we had 8 kids in our project. And those 8 students, we branched out and we did a lot. We connected with our local NPR station, WBEZ, and we work with one of the education reporters, Linda Letton, and so she's going to be coming in this school year to work with the kids and teach them more journalism skills. We also did a project with the Studs Terkel, the Studs Terkel campaign. So the kids went in and they looked at the archives of Studs Terkel. They remixed some of his interviews to see what they wanted to talk about, and that was really good for them. We had a couple of aldermen come into the school. The students interviewed them and talked to him about like what they could do to improve their communities. And so it's a lot of it ended up turning the students into activists, which was really good. And so actually, I just want to talk about the key learning that we as teachers had from this. Our students have a lot to say, and they need that space to say it. And we needed, even though we tried to push as much of this outside of school as we could, structured time in school best supports their learning. And so we need structured time, but mainly it was because our kids have limited access to technology. A lot of our students are not connected at home. They don't have internet access. They don't have computers. You know, they have like basic cell phones. And so a lot of that time was used to help them, like the structured time in school gave them an opportunity to work on their writing skills. And the exposure of having people like Linda Letton in our classrooms, having an alderman in our classrooms, help them see that that learning does take place beyond the walls and that they needed to get out there. But we also had some questions, and is that okay if I share those now? And so one of the things that we struggle with as a staff is where's the line between self-expression and academic expression? And how do we support both of them? Like, for example, like some of the kids wanted to use emojis to express themselves. And while we're trying to do self-expression, we also want them to be able to put those things in words. And so where is that line? Like, so that was one of the questions that we have that we're still grappling with. Like, where where do we draw that line? The grammar part of it, because some of the kids was like, no, I know this isn't correct grammar, Miss Holmes, but this is the way I want to say it because I think it says it best. And so where is that line? And also another thing that we struggle with, because we paid our students for like the stories and the things that they produce. How do we teach soft skills to students that they will need to function in a workspace? Because some of those soft skills are actually counterproductive to the skills that they need to survive in their everyday lives. And so like getting home from school, for example, like one of the boy students, he kept saying, one of the male students kept saying, Miss Holmes, I can't show that side because if I do, they're going to think I'm soft, and then I'm going to have to fight more if I try to negotiate and use my words. And so we're grappling with how do we teach those soft skills that they're good, because he can't use those behaviors in a work setting or even in like college. That really aggressive side of him, he can't do that. But at the same time, I understand why he feels he needs to do that. And the last thing is like, how do we leverage social media as the educational tool? Because our kids had Twitter, and our kids had Facebook, and so like randomly I would go through their Twitter and their Facebook, and I would see something like. And we struggle with this is what you're presenting to the world. Is this really what you want the world to see? And again, it came back to that space of where they were saying, well, Ms. Holmes, we have to do this because, and they would list their reasons why they had to do certain things, even though they knew this may be counterproductive if I want to get a job and my employer sees my Facebook is filled with, pictures of weed or something. But if I don't do it, then I look like a lame. And so that's basically where we are. We also worked a lot with a different high school. We worked with Lake Forest High School, which was really interesting because they're a really affluent suburb of Chicago. And so those students came in, and we had like this day where we talked. We had like just basically a round table, which was really good for our students to see. These kids are not just these rich kids, and they saw our kids as, they're just not these ghetto hood rats or whatever. And so that was a really interesting space. And next year we'll go up to their school, and so we're trying to build that in. And I think that's about all. Is that enough? You want more?
That's awesome. Thank you, Sharon. And I noticed Steve responding to some of what you said, and we are writing project folks, so there's probably, so I'm sort of guessing some of what he might want to say. Steve, do you want to say anything? I also wanted to invite, not to put you on the spot, I also wanted to invite us to talk about like what we have learned the way Sharon did and some of those key questions, because I think it's really important, these questions that come up in the course of this work, like how do we actually negotiate this stuff? But Steve, why don't I talk to you in case there's something you wanted to share there?
I was mostly just admiring how awesome her work was,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand the sort of the conflict that happens when you want learning to be personal for students, and you open it up for them to bring their lives into the classroom, and in this classroom, in this academic space in which we work, we also have these other expectations or ways that we're supposed to do things and ways that we're supposed to be teaching kids to interact with people or create a certain digital footprint that reflects on them in a certain way. But if we want to create student-driven, meaningful learning experiences within the context of our classroom, then it's inevitable that that students are going to be bringing with them, their home and their culture. And so, how to create space in the classroom where both of these where we value the funds of knowledge of the students, but also balance this with the academic expectations that are placed upon us or that we have in the institution of school. That's tricky. So you articulated it so much better than I did, but I'm feeling the same thing too. And the same sorts of conversations are happening in my school, and it's almost like I don't know if there's an answer, but the conversation needs to happen in order for students to think, in order for students to feel like they're empowered and valued. Of course, they have to bring in their own lives into school, and for them to be just aware of the fact that how in different places we're talking in different ways and acting in different ways, and here's how some people are viewing you and being more aware of how and why you're viewing other people a certain way. I just feel like that's in itself right there is valuable. So thanks for bringing that up and getting me thinking about it. Oh, and about questions, because you also asked me about like what sorts of questions do we have as a site, and so one that's related is like how do we maintain and continue to talk about the work that we're doing when we're in an institution that expects things to look a certain way. So, but when we're creating these open-ended experiences where students are in charge, it's not always neat. It's often really messy, and we can't always predict the way that it's going to turn out. But in the context of a culture where like we have to have these objectives ahead of time, and we have to state what students are going to learn ahead of time and what it's supposed to look like, these two things clash. And so it was more, my administrator is pretty supportive and she gets it, but there were a couple of other schools where just figuring out how to articulate the value of the learning that was happening in the context of the conversation that's already happening about what gets valued in schools. This was something that we were still in the process of working through. And then the other thing that we're still trying to figure out is how do we make this work sustainable? And so the work that we're doing on our site, it built off of another grant we got from the National Science Foundation a few years ago to connect science centers and writing project sites. It was called the Intersections Grant. And so that grant was ending like last year, and so this learning grant picked up on where that work left off. And so now we have all these connections with the community, with former students, with the science center and the people in the science center. But how do we, especially in the absence of funding and at the moment, how do we sustain maintain the relationships, build on the relationships that we've already started, and sustain the work that we're doing? And that's something that we're working through right now.
That's great. Dave or Sharon, do you have any things you'd like to share about that?
Yeah, I mean, the sustainability piece is huge for us because we, again, are working in a really resource-poor rural community and trying to leverage what few resources our partners have, but it takes that little extra oomph, and it doesn't take a lot of dollars, but it takes a few to keep things organized and maintained at the kind of level, and to seize upon some of the opportunities that we saw. Year one is great for testing your original theory, and we think this is going to happen, we think we can impact this, and then you get into it and you go, wow, we really missed some huge opportunities. If we, get some more funding in year 2 and year 3, we could really make this happen. So the sustainability piece is huge for us. We're scrounging and looking and writing grants and trying to find different community partners that might be able to kick in a little bit for the coordination piece. But we have identified some really cool opportunities to have double, triple the impact for the number of students, and this idea of that science and math are fun. So yeah, that's what we're kind of struggling with and trying to get in place for next summer. The structure's all there. Our partners, we developed a lot of materials and tracking sheets and timelines and a lot of kind of just the foundational nuts and bolts to make it happen. We have great partners. Of course, we have great students that want to learn and participate. It's just that little bit of funding sauce that helps make it all happen.
Yeah, for us, we're having those same issues about being sustainable because we have kids who want to participate next year. They're already talking about, well, next summer, are we going to do this? Are we going to do this? And right now I'm telling them I'm not sure we'll be able to give you that stipend that we did last time. And some of them are like, well, I'll still do it anyway because I really learned a lot. I did well. You guys really, you're helping me learn. But it's nice to be able to give them that to give them that little extra, because if it's work, then we can really push those soft skills that we're trying to teach them, and we can leverage it by saying, you're being paid to do this, therefore you need to behave in this way, or we need you to conduct yourself as you would on the job site, and this is just not school. It's not just you hanging out and happen to learn something on the side. And so we're looking into trying to figure out how we can fund for the future, because we definitely want to keep it going. Because the kids who started it are now juniors, and so we actually have 2 active classes. We have the sophomores and the juniors who've gone through it, and now we're cultivating it with the freshman class, and our biggest ambassadors for that are those sophomores and juniors who are going back and saying, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. So we're trying to figure that out now.
I do think that we're going to all be together at the upcoming NWP annual meeting, and I feel like that's an opportunity for us to actually start to talk across and share some of the ways that we're thinking about sustainability at our sites. And so thank you for bringing that up. And it's beautiful to see the ways that all these school spaces are expanding into the communities in all these different ways. It's really beautiful to see that, and leveraging all sorts of resources that are already in communities. And it's true that we need to continue to leverage more resources in support of this kind of work, so that these connections can continue to be built. I wanted to also just sort of think if there's anything from your sites that there are a lot of teachers who are wondering, how can I create time and space in my classroom for this kind of work? Are there sort of key lessons that you would pass on to others, or key ideas that you'd want others to think about as they engage in this work and take forward?
I'll go first. I think that it's important for, just speaking as a teacher, to be in dialogue with administrators and knowing just where they're coming from and what their vision is, and being able to articulate to them the importance of what you're thinking about doing, and that this isn't just something you're like throwing into your classroom to try out and see how it goes, even though sort of is. And so that's important too. So that's important that your administrator sees the value in the work that you're doing. And it's also important to not be afraid to have things not go terribly well or make a bit of a mess in the process, because it doesn't always work out, and things aren't going to work out, and you just need to be comfortable with a bit of risk. And I think that your students, and I think that the students, they learn, they'll absorb. They'll pick up on I'm sorry, I forget about the words I'm trying to say. They'll pick up on this vibe, and they'll be willing to take that step with you, so long as you're open and honest with what you're trying to do, and the fact that you're putting yourself out there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for many of the teachers we work with, I think a lot of it is to help them feel like they're not alone if they're going to try something new in their classroom, or try something new, even outside the classroom. Is to let them know there's community resources, there's project partners you can work with, there's other really awesome, energized, excited adult partners you can team up with to give it a go. And like Steve says, just try it. You don't have to. Have to guarantee that there's going to be these huge outcomes, but start small and just try some stuff, and helping teachers know that there's support for them, beyond their administration and their colleagues. There's community support for these kinds of activities out there, and so a lot of times just helping them find those supports and linking them up with those supports.
I would just say that they need to share their vision with their students, because that's actually where it starts. And so, like, I had this vision, and I told the kids, this is what I think. What did you think about it? And they sort of put some parameters around it for me to help clarify my vision, so that moving forward I knew where we wanted to go, and they were coming with me, and I wasn't dragging them, that we were going together. So I would just say that make sure that you include your kids on making that vision.
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so yes, yes, and yes on everything that everybody else said. But one thing that I feel is really important for me to bring up is how important it was to have time and space created and set aside and valued for the people who are involved, the adults who are involved, to work and plan and think together. Whenever you're doing something like this, there's tons of planning involved, and when there's multiple people, if there's not a time for everybody to sit down and think and write together and share about how it's going, none of the work that's happening in the classrooms is going to be possible. And so, as our sites, we carved out just a few retreat weekends for just all the people to get together and think together, and that to me was invaluable in making it work. Okay, that's all.
Awesome. I'm really glad I asked. That was great. Great thoughts from all of you. So thank you so much. We are at time, so I just wanted to wrap this third webinar series with a shout out to the previous webinar series. We had this great, a couple of great webinars where you also got to hear about work happening in the Bronx, in Greenville, North Carolina, in Southern Connecticut. And then we had another one that picked up on work that was happening in, let's see, where was that other? In New York and, oh, I'm forgetting. But anyway, all over the country, sorry. We have projects like this developing, and we're all starting to share and think about our work and what do we learn from each other, what key questions have come up, and how do we sustain this work in practice. And if you were to visit now educatorinnovator.org, you'll see a link to the 2015 Educator Innovator Challenge, the LRNG Innovator Challenge that's happening. And this year we are challenging educators to reach beyond the classroom door, much like all of you have done, to develop partnerships and programs that connect in and out of school learning and create opportunities for young people to follow their interests and do ambitious work across the many spheres of their lives. So we're really looking forward to proposals that will be submitted as part of that challenge, and the RFP will be live on early November, November 6th, I believe. And if you'd like to keep abreast of further opportunities from Educator Innovator and its partners, go again to educatorinnovator.org and sign up for the monthly newsletter. There's also a daily blog, or it's not daily, but several times a week. You'd also subscribe for the blog if you'd like to. But the newsletter is great, and you get a summary of things that have happened this month and keep you sort of in the loop around things at Educator Innovator. And you can follow us at innovates_ed. So thank you so much to everybody for taking and making the time to be here, for sharing with us today, and for best wishes on your projects. And I'm looking forward to seeing you all in Minneapolis coming up soon. So anybody who's coming to Minneapolis should look for the LRNG Grantees Roundtable session, where we'll have a chance to go a little deeper in the work and continue to talk across the 14 sites that have been learning over this past year. So thank you very much, everyone.